Chapter 1. The Wedding Day Disaster. Nolan Kim, a shy and soft-spoken Omega, watches in panic as his family scrambles for answers. His older brother, Caleb, the favored child and the one meant to marry billionaire Alpha Zach Price, has vanished just hours before the ceremony. Their father, desperate to save their family from financial ruin, pleads with Nolan to take Caleb's place. Torn between fear and duty, Nolan reluctantly agrees, knowing the weight of his family's survival rests on him. When Nolan arrives at the altar wearing his brother's suit, Zach's icy glare freezes him in place. Zach quickly realizes he's been duped, and his sharp words cut through the silence. "You're not Caleb." Nolan stammers an apology, trying to explain, but Zach isn't interested. Furious and humiliated, Zach turns to the guests, announcing the wedding will proceed only because he refuses to let the Kim family make a fool of him. The ceremony is a tense affair, with Zach refusing to touch Nolan even for the traditional kiss. Nolan feels small and out of place as whispers ripple through the crowd, but he pushes through, determined to make the best of the situation. When the reception begins, Zach leaves without a word, leaving Nolan alone to face judgmental stares and probing questions. Later that night, Nolan arrives at Zach's penthouse, where he's greeted with icy indifference. Zach makes it clear that their marriage is nothing but a sham. "Don't think for a second that you'll replace Caleb," he says coldly. Nolan, heartbroken but determined, silently vows to prove he's not just a stand-in. Chapter 2. A Hostile Honeymoon. The following morning, Zach announces they'll be leaving for a secluded estate in the countryside for their honeymoon. Nolan barely has time to pack before he's whisked away in Zach's private jet. The flight is tense, with Zach ignoring him completely while reading financial reports. Nolan, seated across from him, feels invisible and out of place. Upon arriving at the estate, Nolan is struck by its cold, minimalist design, much like Zach himself. Zach barely spares him a glance as he orders the staff to show Nolan to a separate room. Nolan feels his heart sink but doesn't complain, realizing Zach has no intention of treating this marriage as real. Dinner that evening is no better. Zach speaks only to the staff, avoiding eye contact with Nolan entirely. Nolan tries to break the silence, offering polite conversation, but Zach cuts him off sharply. "We don't need to pretend when no one's watching," he says, his tone dripping with disdain. Humiliated, Nolan excuses himself, retreating to his room. That night, Nolan lies awake, replaying the events of the day. He wonders if he made the wrong choice by agreeing to this farce of a marriage. But as tears threaten to fall, he reminds himself that he did this for his family. No matter how Zach treats him, he won't let his sacrifices be in vain. Chapter 3. Secrets Unveiled. A week into their honeymoon, Nolan overhears a heated conversation between Zach and one of his business associates. The associate accuses Zach of marrying into the Kim family to secure a lucrative merger deal. Nolan is stunned but pieces it together. His family's company is in worse shape than he thought, and Zach had only agreed to the marriage to protect his own interests. Confronting his father through a tense video call, Nolan learns the full truth. The Kim family's business is on the verge of bankruptcy, and Caleb's marriage to Zach was their last-ditch effort to salvage their reputation. Nolan feels betrayed, realizing his family had kept him in the dark while pushing him into an arrangement they'd orchestrated. Later that evening, Zach finds Nolan sulking in the garden. Sensing something is off, he asks, "What's your problem now?" Nolan snaps, his anger finally boiling over. "You think you're the only one who's been used? My family tricked me into this just like they tricked you." For the first time, Zach looks taken aback, as if seeing Nolan in a new light. Though the confrontation doesn't resolve anything, it creates a shift between them. Nolan no longer feels like a helpless pawn, and Zach begins to realize there's more to Nolan than he initially thought. Chapter 4. The First Bonding. 2 weeks later, Nolan experiences his first heat since the wedding. It catches him off guard, and he locks himself in his room, desperate to handle it alone. However, the pheromones quickly become overwhelming, and Zach, despite his initial resistance, is forced to intervene. Zach finds Nolan curled up on the floor, trembling and vulnerable. Despite his anger toward the situation, instinct overrides reason. He helps Nolan through the heat, staying by his side the entire time. The bond between them deepens in a way neither of them can ignore. The following morning, Nolan is mortified, unable to meet Zach's gaze. Zach, however, surprises him with a rare moment of gentleness. "You don't have to apologize," he says quietly, leaving Nolan confused and conflicted. Despite the fragile truce, both men are left reeling. Zach begins to question his feelings, while Nolan wonders if their connection is purely physical or if something deeper is starting to form. Chapter 5. The Return of the Brother. Just as things begin to settle, Caleb reappears, strolling into Zach's office as if nothing happened. Nolan finds out through a frantic phone call from his father, warning him to tread carefully. Caleb insists he made a mistake and wants to take his rightful place by Zach's side. Zach's reaction is cold and measured. While he doesn't welcome Caleb back with open arms, it's clear he still harbors unresolved feelings for him. Nolan feels a pang of jealousy but doesn't let it show, unwilling to give Caleb the satisfaction. Caleb, however, isn't subtle about his disdain for Nolan. During a tense family dinner, he openly mocks Nolan for being the lesser brother. Zach intervenes, shutting Caleb down with a single sharp comment, but the damage is done. Nolan feels humiliated and questions whether he'll ever truly belong. That night, Zach finds Nolan alone on the balcony, staring at the city lights. "Don't let him get to you," Zach says, his tone softer than usual. For the first time, Nolan sees a glimpse of someone who might care, even if Zach doesn't fully realize it himself. Chapter 6. Public Appearances. Zach insists on taking Nolan to a high-profile charity gala, much to Caleb's dismay. Nolan feels out of his depth among the elite crowd, but Zach surprises him by offering his arm and introducing him as his husband. For a moment, Nolan feels like he truly belongs. The evening takes a turn when Caleb arrives uninvited, spreading rumors about Nolan being an imposter. Nolan's confidence wavers, but he channels his frustration into proving Caleb wrong. He charms the guests with his wit and sincerity, earning their admiration. Zach watches from a distance, impressed by Nolan's resilience. When Caleb tries to corner Zach, he brushes him off, choosing to stand by Nolan's side instead. For the first time, Zach publicly defends Nolan, making it clear where his loyalty lies. On the drive home, Zach tells Nolan, "You were incredible tonight." Though the words are simple, they mean the world to Nolan, who finally feels like he's more than just a stand-in. Chapter 7. The Brothers' Schemes. Caleb, refusing to admit defeat, devises a plan to win Zach back. He corners Zach in his office, bringing up old memories and attempting to rekindle their past connection. Zach, though tempted, begins to see through Caleb's manipulative nature. Meanwhile, Nolan grows suspicious of Caleb's frequent visits and tries to confront him. Caleb smirks, taunting Nolan with the idea that Zach will never choose him over his first love. Nolan feels his insecurities creeping in but refuses to back down. One evening, Caleb orchestrates a misunderstanding by planting evidence that makes it look like Zach invited him for a private dinner. Nolan, heartbroken, storms out before Zach can explain. Zach is furious at Caleb's meddling and finally warns him to stay away. Zach tracks Nolan down at a park, where he finds him crying under a street lamp. Taking Nolan's hands, Zach says, "I don't care about Caleb. I chose you." Though Nolan wants to believe him, trust is still a fragile thing between them. Chapter 8. Boundaries Tested. Determined to keep Caleb at bay, Zach restricts his access to their lives and sets boundaries. He openly informs Caleb that Nolan is his husband, and no one will interfere with their marriage. Caleb, while visibly angered, pretends to accept Zach's decision, though his scheming eyes tell another story. At home, Nolan appreciates Zach's effort to defend him, but he remains hesitant to open up completely. Zach, noticing Nolan's guarded nature, tries to bridge the gap by spending more time with him. Their interactions grow warmer, and Zach starts to see Nolan's genuine charm and intelligence. One evening, Zach invites Nolan to his study to discuss a potential project with the Kim family business. Nolan is surprised but pleased, feeling that Zach might finally see him as more than an obligation. Their shared discussion turns into a surprisingly enjoyable evening, with laughter softening the walls between them. As they part ways for the night, Zach hesitates at Nolan's door. For the first time, there's a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. "Good night, Nolan," he says softly, leaving Nolan confused and hopeful about where their relationship is heading. Chapter 9. The Media Storm. The media catches wind of Caleb's return and begins spinning stories about a love triangle between Zach, Caleb, and Nolan. Tabloids run cruel headlines, painting Nolan as the undeserving outsider who stole Caleb's place. The pressure becomes unbearable for Nolan, who starts doubting his ability to endure this marriage. During a company event, reporters bombard Nolan with invasive questions, asking if he feels like a placeholder for Caleb. Zach steps in, silencing the reporters with a sharp warning and whisking Nolan away. In the car, Nolan quietly thanks Zach for defending him, though the damage to his confidence lingers. That night, Nolan finds solace in his hobby of painting. Zach, unable to sleep, stumbles upon him in the art room, captivated by the emotions Nolan pours into his work. "You're talented," Zach admits, surprising Nolan. For the first time, Nolan feels seen for who he truly is. Their shared moment in the art room becomes a turning point. Zach begins to open up about his own struggles with the media, and Nolan feels a glimmer of hope that their bond might grow stronger despite the challenges. Chapter 10. The First Dance. At a grand gala hosted by one of Zach's business partners, Nolan feels out of place yet again. As the evening progresses, a dance is announced, and partners are expected to take the floor. Caleb, lurking nearby, offers to dance with Nolan, his smirk taunting Zach to intervene. Zach doesn't hesitate. Ignoring Caleb's smug expression, he takes Nolan's hand and leads him to the dance floor. "You're my husband." "Let's show them," Zach says firmly. Nolan, nervous but touched, follows his lead, their movements awkward at first but growing graceful. The crowd watches in awe as Zach and Nolan glide across the floor, their chemistry undeniable. For the first time, Nolan feels a sense of belonging by Zach's side. He notices how Zach's eyes soften when they meet his, sparking feelings Nolan can no longer ignore. After the dance, Zach leans in and whispers, "You're stronger than you think." Those words linger with Nolan, who realizes that, despite the obstacles, he's beginning to fall for the alpha who once despised him. Chapter 11. Old Scars Resurface. During a quiet evening at home, Nolan stumbles upon a box of Zach's old belongings. Among them is a photo of Zach and Caleb, smiling together during happier times. Though Nolan knows he shouldn't, he can't help but feel a pang of jealousy. When Zach finds Nolan with the photo, his expression darkens. "That was a long time ago," he says curtly, taking the photo and putting it away. Nolan tries to brush it off, but the moment reopens wounds for both of them. Later, Nolan confronts Zach about why he married into the Kim family despite his lingering feelings for Caleb. Zach hesitates before admitting, "It wasn't just about business. I thought I could move on, but Caleb made it impossible." His honesty leaves Nolan conflicted, unsure if Zach truly sees him or just a replacement. The tension between them grows, but Nolan decides to focus on his own growth. He begins working on a charity project, pouring his energy into something meaningful and proving to himself that he's more than just an accessory in Zach's life. Chapter 12. Sparks of Trust. Weeks pass, and though the tension between Zach and Nolan hasn't fully eased, there are small moments of understanding that bring them closer. One evening, Zach returns home late to find Nolan asleep on the couch, a blanket slipping off his shoulders. Without thinking, Zach gently adjusts the blanket and watches him for a moment longer than necessary. The next morning, Nolan wakes up to find breakfast waiting for him, a rare gesture from Zach. While the billionaire feigns indifference, Nolan notices the subtle shift in his demeanor. Over breakfast, Zach begins asking Nolan about his charity project, showing genuine interest for the first time. Encouraged by Zach's curiosity, Nolan opens up about his dreams of using his platform as Zach's spouse to help struggling Omega communities. Zach listens intently, and for the first time, they share a meaningful conversation without their usual barbs. Nolan begins to feel that, perhaps, Zach sees more in him than he thought. Later that day, Nolan catches himself smiling at the thought of Zach's rare kindness. Though he still harbors doubts about their relationship, he can't deny the warmth growing between them. Slowly but surely, the icy walls between them are beginning to thaw. Chapter 13. Caleb's Ultimatum. Caleb, frustrated by his inability to worm his way back into Zach's life, decides to take a more aggressive approach. He confronts Zach at the office, demanding that he leave Nolan and come back where he belongs. Zach, tired of Caleb's manipulative games, refuses outright. Caleb doesn't back down, accusing Zach of settling for Nolan because he's convenient. He tries to use their shared past as leverage, But Zach shuts him down with a cold reminder that Caleb was the one who walked away first. "You made your choice," Zach says firmly. "Now live with it." Meanwhile, Nolan receives a mysterious envelope at home containing photos of Caleb and Zach together, clearly intended to stir doubt. Though hurt, Nolan decides not to let Caleb's schemes dictate his emotions. When Zach comes home, Nolan confronts him directly, showing him the photos and asking for the truth. Zach, though annoyed at Caleb's persistence, is impressed by Nolan's straightforwardness. He assures Nolan that whatever he had with Caleb is over and that he's committed to their arrangement. Nolan isn't sure if he fully believes him, but he appreciates Zach's honesty, feeling a glimmer of hope for their future. Chapter 14. Shared Vulnerabilities. One stormy evening, the power goes out in their mansion, forcing Zach and Nolan to spend the night in the living room by candlelight. At first, the silence is awkward, but as the hours pass, they begin to share pieces of their past. Nolan reveals the struggles he faced as an Omega, always living in the shadow of his older brother and feeling like an afterthought in his family. Zach, in turn, speaks about the pressures of inheriting his father's empire and the loneliness that comes with his wealth. The conversation grows unexpectedly personal when Nolan asks Zach why he closed himself off to love. Zach hesitates but admits that Caleb's betrayal left him wary of trusting anyone again. Nolan, though hesitant, promises that he's not like Caleb and won't betray Zach's trust if given the chance. As the storm rages outside, the two share a rare moment of understanding. For the first time, Zach sees Nolan as more than an obligation, and Nolan feels a flicker of connection he never thought possible. Chapter 15. The rivalry escalates. Determined to tear them apart, Caleb escalates his efforts by leaking false rumors to the media, claiming that Zach is still in love with him and only married Nolan out of pity. The scandal causes a media frenzy, putting immense pressure on both Zach and Nolan. At a board meeting, Zach faces criticism from shareholders who question the stability of his personal life and its impact on the company. Though furious, Zach maintains his composure and assures them that his marriage to Nolan is solid. His confidence leaves no room for doubt, but inside, he's seething. When Zach returns home, he finds Nolan visibly upset, scrolling through hateful comments online. Nolan wonders aloud if their marriage was a mistake, but Zach surprises him by taking his hand and saying, "You're stronger than this, and so are we." His words, though simple, give Nolan the courage to face the storm head-on. The next day, Nolan holds a press conference to address the rumors, presenting himself with grace and poise. He shuts down Caleb's lies with facts and earns the respect of both the media and Zach's colleagues. Watching from the sidelines, Zach feels a surge of pride, and something deeper, for the Omega who's proving to be far more resilient than anyone expected. Chapter 16. A Night to Remember. To celebrate Nolan's success at the press conference, Zach arranges an intimate dinner at their mansion. Though surprised by the gesture, Nolan accepts, curious about Zach's sudden warmth. The table is elegantly set, and for the first time, the atmosphere between them feels relaxed and genuine. As they talk over dinner, Zach opens up about his admiration for Nolan's courage in standing up to the media. Nolan, in turn, admits he never expected Zach to defend him so fiercely. Their conversation flows effortlessly, and for once, the weight of their complicated past feels lighter. As the evening winds down, Zach offers Nolan a dance in the dimly lit living room. Though hesitant at first, Nolan agrees, and the two sway slowly to soft music. The closeness sparks an undeniable chemistry between them, one that neither can ignore. By the end of the night, as Nolan heads to bed, he finds himself smiling. He realizes that his feelings for Zach are deepening, even if he's unsure whether they're reciprocated. Meanwhile, Zach lingers in the living room, grappling with emotions he's been trying to suppress. Chapter 17. Shadows of the Past. Just as things seem to improve between Zach and Nolan, Caleb makes another calculated move. This time, he approaches Nolan directly, spinning a tale about how Zach still loves him but is too proud to admit it. Caleb's words plant seeds of doubt in Nolan's mind, despite his attempts to remain strong. When Zach notices Nolan's distant behavior, he confronts him, demanding to know what's wrong. Reluctantly, Nolan tells him about Caleb's claims. Zach is furious, not at Nolan but at Caleb's unrelenting interference. He assures Nolan that Caleb's manipulations mean nothing, but Nolan struggles to fully believe him. To prove his sincerity, Zach decides to sever ties with Caleb once and for all. He meets with Caleb in a public setting, making it clear that their history is over and that his future lies with Nolan. Caleb doesn't take the rejection well and vows that Zach will regret turning him away. Nolan, watching from the sidelines, begins to see Zach's efforts as genuine. While he's still wary of Caleb's lingering presence, he starts to believe that Zach might truly care for him. This newfound hope gives Nolan the strength to trust Zach a little more. Chapter 18. A Threat Revealed. Caleb's rejection drives him to take drastic measures. He hires a private investigator to dig up dirt on Nolan, hoping to find something that will discredit him in Zach's eyes. The investigator uncovers a piece of Nolan's past, a failed relationship that ended in scandal. The next day, the tabloids explode with headlines about Nolan's supposed betrayal of his former partner. The fabricated story spreads like wildfire, putting Nolan in the spotlight once again. At first, Zach assumes the worst, questioning whether Nolan has been hiding things from him. Heartbroken, Nolan defends himself, explaining the truth behind the headlines. He reveals how his former partner framed him to cover their own indiscretions, leaving him to take the fall. Zach listens carefully and begins to realize how much Nolan has endured. Determined to protect Nolan, Zach launches an investigation into the source of the story. When he discovers Caleb's involvement, his fury reaches a boiling point. Zach vows to make Caleb pay for crossing the line and hurting Nolan once again. Chapter 19. A Show of Unity. Despite the chaos, Zach and Nolan decide to present a united front at an upcoming charity gala. Zach sees it as an opportunity to restore Nolan's reputation, while Nolan views it as a chance to prove his resilience. The two prepare for the event together, their partnership growing stronger. At the gala, all eyes are on them as they make their entrance. Nolan, dressed in a sleek suit, exudes confidence, while Zach stays close by his side. Their chemistry is undeniable, and whispers of admiration ripple through the crowd. During the event, Nolan gives a heartfelt speech about the importance of standing strong in the face of adversity. His words resonate with the audience, earning him a standing ovation. Zach, watching from the sidelines, feels a swell of pride for the man he once underestimated. By the end of the night, Zach takes Nolan's hand in front of everyone, a silent declaration of their growing bond. For the first time, Nolan feels like he belongs by Zach's side, and Zach begins to realize just how much Nolan means to him. Chapter 20. Caleb's Last Move. Caleb, furious at being humiliated and cast aside, decides to make one final move. He leaks a series of photos to the media, ones taken by the private investigator, showing Nolan in compromising situations with his ex-partner. Though taken out of context, the images are damning and ignite a fresh wave of public scrutiny. When Nolan sees the photos, he's devastated, fearing that Zach will finally give up on him. Zach, however, has learned to see through Caleb's schemes. He assures Nolan that he believes him and vows to clear his name, standing by him even when the public begins to doubt their marriage. Zach's loyalty strengthens Nolan's resolve, and together they hold a press conference. Nolan courageously addresses the photos and the smear campaign, exposing Caleb's involvement and sharing his truth. The media, captivated by his honesty and poise, begins to rally behind him. As the press conference concludes, Zach takes Nolan's hand in front of the cameras, declaring, "This is my husband, and no one will tear us apart." Nolan, overwhelmed by emotion, realizes that Zach's words are no longer just for show, they come from the heart. Chapter 21. A Growing Bond. With Caleb's schemes publicly exposed, the media frenzy begins to die down. For the first time in months, Zach and Nolan find themselves with a moment of peace. They spend a quiet evening together, reflecting on everything they've endured and how far they've come. Nolan thanks Zach for standing by him, admitting that he didn't expect Zach to care so much. Zach, in turn, confesses that Nolan has proven him wrong in more ways than one. "You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for," he says, his tone filled with genuine admiration. The moment becomes intimate as Zach brushes a strand of hair from Nolan's face, his touch lingering. Their eyes meet, and for the first time, there's no hesitation between them. Zach leans in, and they share a kiss that feels like the start of something real. As they pull away, Nolan smiles, his cheeks flushed. He knows there's still a long way to go, but for the first time, he feels truly hopeful about their future together. Zach, too, feels a sense of warmth he hasn't known in years, realizing that Nolan may be exactly what he's been missing. Chapter 22. Olivia's Return. Just when things seem to be falling into place, Olivia makes an unexpected return. She shows up at the mansion unannounced, claiming she wants to make amends and insisting that she never intended to hurt Nolan or Zach. Her presence immediately stirs tension between the couple. Nolan, torn between anger and guilt, agrees to hear Olivia out. She apologizes for abandoning him on the wedding day but hints that she regrets letting Zach go. Her lingering glances at Zach don't go unnoticed, and Nolan begins to feel the insecurity creeping back in. Zach, however, has no patience for Olivia's games. He makes it clear that she has no place in their lives and warns her to stay away. His unwavering support reassures Nolan, but Olivia's presence is a stark reminder of the shaky foundation of their relationship. Before leaving, Olivia delivers a parting shot. "You may have Zach now, but let's see how long that lasts." Though her words are meant to unsettle them, they only serve to strengthen Zach's resolve to protect Nolan and their growing bond. Chapter 23. Building a Future. With Olivia's departure, Zach and Nolan refocus on their future. They begin working together on Nolan's charity project, with Zach using his resources to support Nolan's vision. The collaboration brings them closer, giving them a shared purpose and deepening their connection. As they spend more time together, Zach finds himself drawn to Nolan's passion and determination. He begins to see Nolan not just as his spouse but as his equal. Nolan, in turn, grows more confident in his role by Zach's side, finally feeling like he belongs. Their newfound partnership faces its first test when a rival business attempts to sabotage Zach's company. Nolan steps in with a clever solution, surprising everyone with his quick thinking and resourcefulness. Zach is impressed, realizing just how much he underestimated Nolan's potential. By the end of the ordeal, Zach looks at Nolan with newfound respect and admiration. For the first time, he sees a future where their relationship isn't just an arrangement but a genuine partnership built on trust and love. Chapter 24. Confessions. One quiet evening, as they sit together on the balcony overlooking the city, Zach finally opens up to Nolan about his deepest fears. He admits that he was afraid to let Nolan in, fearing another betrayal like Caleb's. Nolan listens patiently, his heart aching for the pain Zach has carried. In return, Nolan shares his own fears of never being enough, of always living in Olivia's shadow. He tells Zach how much it means to him that Zach stood by him, even when the world seemed to turn against them. Their honesty creates a new level of intimacy between them. Zach, unable to hold back any longer, confesses, "I didn't think I'd ever feel this way again, but you've changed everything, Nolan." His words leave Nolan speechless, tears brimming in his eyes. He reaches for Zach's hand, and they sit in comfortable silence, the weight of their emotions speaking louder than words. That night, as they lie together, both men feel a sense of peace and belonging they've never known before. For the first time, their marriage feels real, not out of obligation, but out of love. Chapter 25. A New Beginning. The final chapter sees Zach and Nolan preparing to celebrate their first anniversary. The mansion is abuzz with activity as they host a charity gala to support Nolan's cause, a symbol of how far they've come together. During his speech, Zach takes a moment to thank Nolan for being his partner in every sense of the word. "This past year has been anything but easy, but I wouldn't trade it for anything," he says, his voice filled with emotion. The audience applauds, but it's Nolan's smile that matters most to him. As the evening winds down, Zach surprises Nolan with a gift, a small, secluded property where Nolan can establish a permanent home for his charity. Nolan is overwhelmed by the gesture, realizing just how much Zach supports his dreams. The story ends with the two of them dancing under the stars, their hearts finally at peace. Despite the challenges they've faced, they know they're stronger together. Their marriage, once built on lies and deceit, has become a love story neither of them ever expected.